I've had enough. Every single day, you park your fancy SUV in front of my driveway like you own the whole damn street. I served this country for 23 years as a police officer, and this is the respect I get? Lady, I've tried being nice. I've tried being reasonable. But today you're going to learn what happens when you push a man too far. You think because I'm retired, I don't have connections anymore? You think because I'm black, I don't deserve respect? Well, today you're going to regret ever meeting me. I promise you that. Before we continue, if you enjoy real-life justice stories, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. Moving into the peaceful neighborhood of Oakwood Heights had been Marcus Johnson's dream for years. After retiring from the police force with commendations and honors after more than 2 decades of service, the 58-year-old former lieutenant had saved enough to buy a modest but comfortable home on Maple Street. The neighborhood was everything he'd hoped for: tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and most importantly, a sense of tranquility that had been missing during his years wearing the badge. Marcus had served in one of the toughest precincts in the city. He'd seen humanity at its worst, but also at its best. As one of the few black officers who had risen through the ranks, he'd faced challenges both on the streets and within the department itself. But he'd persevered, earning respect through his unwavering integrity and commitment to justice. Now, all he wanted was to enjoy his retirement in peace. The first month in his new home had been blissful. Marcus spent his days renovating the house, planting a garden, and getting to know his neighbors. Most welcomed him warmly. The Patels next door brought over homemade samosas. The Gonzalez family across the street invited him to their Sunday barbecue, and old Mr. Wilkins from down the block would stop by to share gardening tips. It felt like the community Marcus had always wanted to be part of. But then he met Patricia Winters. Patricia lived 3 houses down in the largest home on the block, a sprawling 2-story colonial with perfectly manicured lawns and a 3-car garage. She drove a gleaming white Range Rover with personalized license plates that read, Patricia 1. She was the head of the neighborhood association and, as Marcus would soon discover, considered herself the unofficial ruler of Maple Street. Their first encounter had been at the monthly neighborhood association meeting. Marcus had attended, hoping to integrate himself further into the community. When he introduced himself as a retired police lieutenant, most residents seemed impressed. Patricia, however, had merely pursed her lips and asked, "And which department did you say you were from?" The way she emphasized, which made it clear she had her doubts about his credentials. Marcus had brushed off the interaction, attributing it to first meeting awkwardness. But in the following days, he noticed Patricia watching him from her window whenever he worked in his front yard. She'd make a show of checking her watch when his lawnmower ran past 6 p.m., though the neighborhood rules clearly stated yard work was permitted until 8 p.m. The real trouble began when Patricia's daughter came to visit. Rather than parking in Patricia's spacious driveway or in front of Patricia's house, she had parked directly in front of Marcus's driveway, blocking him in. When Marcus walked over to politely ask her to move the car, the young woman had rolled her eyes and said, "I'll just be a minute," before sauntering into her mother's house. That minute had turned into 3 hours. When Marcus finally went to knock on Patricia's door, she had answered with a false smile. "Is there a problem, Mr. Johnson?" "Yes, ma'am. Your daughter's car is blocking my driveway, and I need to get to a doctor's appointment." Patricia had glanced at her watch. "The medical center closes at 5. Doesn't it? It's already 4:30. You'll never make it across town in time anyway." Then she had closed the door in his face. Marcus had been forced to reschedule his appointment. When he returned home later that evening, the car was gone. But the message was clear. Patricia didn't consider his inconvenience important. What Marcus couldn't understand was why. He had done nothing to antagonize this woman. He kept his property in excellent condition, followed all neighborhood guidelines, and was respectful to everyone he met. Yet Patricia seemed determined to make his life difficult. The driveway blocking incident became a pattern. Every time Patricia's daughter visited, which seemed to be at least twice a week, she would park in front of Marcus's driveway. If her friends came over, they too would park there, despite the ample street parking available elsewhere on the block. When Marcus would ask them to move, they would respond with excuses, eye rolls, or simply ignore him altogether. Marcus tried addressing the issue through proper channels. He brought it up at the next neighborhood association meeting, but Patricia, as the head of the association, dismissed his concerns. "We've never had complaints about parking before," she said smoothly. "Perhaps you're being a bit sensitive." The way several members shifted uncomfortably in their seats told Marcus they understood what Patricia was implying. His race was being used against him, albeit in the subtle, deniable way that he had encountered throughout his career. Still, Marcus persisted. He spoke privately with other neighbors, many of whom expressed sympathy but seemed reluctant to challenge Patricia's authority. He documented each incident, taking photos of the blocked driveway and noting times and dates. He even left polite notes on the windshields of the offending vehicles. Nothing changed. If anything, the situation worsened. Now it wasn't just Patricia's daughter and friends. Patricia herself began parking her Range Rover partially blocking his driveway, leaving just enough space that she could claim it was an accident if confronted. The final straw came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Marcus's sister had been hospitalized with chest pains, and he had received an urgent call to come immediately. But when he rushed outside, he found Patricia's Range Rover completely blocking his driveway. The rain was pouring down as he ran to Patricia's house, ringing the doorbell repeatedly. He could see lights on inside, but no one answered. He called out, knocked harder, but the house remained silent. Drenched and desperate, Marcus returned to his home and called for a taxi. It took 30 minutes to arrive, and by the time he reached the hospital, his sister had already been taken for emergency surgery. He spent hours in the waiting room, worried sick, all because he couldn't use his own car. When the doctor finally emerged to tell him that his sister would recover, the relief was overwhelming. But as Marcus sat by her bedside, watching her sleep, a slow, burning anger began to build inside him. This wasn't about parking anymore. This was about basic human decency, about respect, about his right to live peacefully in his own home. His sister stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Marcus, you made it." He squeezed her hand. "Of course I did. Nothing could keep me away." But something had tried to keep him away. Someone had tried. And as Marcus drove home in another taxi late that night, seeing Patricia's Range Rover still blocking his driveway, something inside him snapped. He was done being the bigger person. Done trying to handle things through proper channels. 23 years on the force had taught him that sometimes you had to fight fire with fire, and he knew exactly how to do it. The next morning, Marcus waited until Patricia left for her weekly tennis lesson. Then he made a phone call to an old friend from his days on the force, Captain Miguel Ramirez, who now headed the traffic division across town. "Miguel, it's Marcus Johnson. I need a favor." "Marcus, good to hear from you." "Name it, brother." "I've got a situation with a neighbor who keeps blocking my driveway. I've tried everything by the book, but nothing's working. I need someone to take this seriously." Miguel's voice turned professional. "That's actually a violation of City Code 38.7. Give me the details, and I'll send someone out." Marcus provided the information, including all the documentation he'd gathered over the months. Then he settled in to wait. That afternoon, Patricia returned from tennis, her Range Rover pulling up to its usual spot, partially blocking Marcus's driveway. Marcus watched from his window as she stepped out, dressed in pristine white tennis clothes, her blonde hair perfectly in place despite her supposed exercise. Just as she was retrieving her designer tennis bag from the back seat, a police cruiser pulled up behind her. Officer Daniels, a young officer Marcus didn't recognize, stepped out and approached Patricia. "Ma'am, is this your vehicle?" Patricia straightened, adopting the authoritative tone she used at neighborhood meetings. "Yes, it is. Is there a problem, officer?" "You're blocking a private driveway. That's a violation of City Code 38.7. Patricia's laugh was dismissive. "I'm not blocking anything. There's plenty of room." "Ma'am, the law states that no vehicle may be parked within 3 feet of a driveway entrance without the property owner's permission. Your vehicle is clearly in violation." Patricia's expression hardened. "Do you know who I am?" My husband plays golf with Judge Robertson every Saturday. Officer Daniels remained professional. I'm going to have to issue you a citation, ma'am. I'll need to see your license and registration. This is ridiculous. I've parked here for years, and no one has ever complained. A complaint has been filed, ma'am, with substantial documentation of repeated violations. Patricia's head whipped toward Marcus's house, her eyes narrowing when she spotted him in the window. Tim, you're taking the word of him over mine. The slight hesitation, the emphasis on him. Marcus recognized the coded language immediately, and from the slight stiffening of Officer Daniels' posture, so did he. Ma'am, I need your license and registration, please. Patricia fumbled in her purse, her face flushed with anger. As she handed over her documents, she continued her protests. This is harassment. I'm going to call the precinct captain about this. Officer Daniels didn't respond as he wrote the ticket. When he handed it to Patricia along with her documents, he simply said, "Please move your vehicle immediately, ma'am. Have a nice day." As the officer drove away, Patricia stood fuming in the street, the ticket clutched in her hand. Her gaze locked with Marcus's through the window, her expression one of pure venom. Marcus nodded slightly, then drew his curtains closed. Round one had gone to him, but he knew this was far from over. The next day, Patricia parked directly in front of his driveway, completely blocking it. The message was clear. If he wanted to play this game, she would escalate. Marcus sighed, took a photo of the car, and called the non-emergency police line. 2 hours later, another officer came, issued another ticket, and insisted Patricia move her car immediately. This pattern continued for a week. Patricia would park blocking his driveway, Marcus would call, officers would come, tickets would be issued. Marcus learned from Miguel that Patricia had indeed called to complain, demanding that the tickets be voided. But with the photographic evidence Marcus had provided, her demands were denied. After the 7th ticket, Patricia changed tactics. Instead of parking her own car in front of Marcus's driveway, she began hosting gatherings, books on, tennis friends, neighborhood association meetings, and her guests would arrive to find Patricia directing them to park in front of Marcus's house. If he called the police, it wouldn't be Patricia getting the tickets, but her friends. It was clever, but Marcus hadn't become a lieutenant without learning how to outthink opponents. He installed a security camera focused on his driveway, capturing clear footage of Patricia directing cars to park there. He compiled this new evidence and sent it to Miguel. The next time Patricia hosted her book club and Marcus found himself blocked in, the response was different. 2 police cruisers arrived, and Officer Daniels returned, accompanied by a sergeant. They issued tickets to every illegally parked car, but this time, they also served Patricia with a citation for orchestrating the violations. Mrs. Winters, we have video evidence of you directing vehicles to park illegally. This constitutes a separate offense under City Code 38.9, interfering with right of access. Patricia's outrage was incandescent. Video evidence? Has been spying on me? That's an invasion of privacy. Ma'am, citizens have the right to install security cameras on their own property. The footage clearly shows you on a public street directing vehicles to block Mr. Johnson's driveway. The sergeant handed her the citation. This carries a fine of $500, and subsequent violations will result in increased penalties. Additionally, if this pattern continues, we could pursue charges of harassment. The book club ladies watched wide-eyed from Patricia's porch as she sputtered indignantly. For the first time since Marcus had moved in, he saw cracks in her facade of neighborhood authority. Some of the women were already moving their cars, looking embarrassed to be associated with the situation. That evening, Marcus received several apologetic emails from book club members, claiming they had no idea they were being used in Patricia's vendetta. One woman, Eleanor, even stopped by in person to apologize, bringing a homemade apple pie as a peace offering. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Johnson. Patricia told us that parking arrangements had been agreed upon with all neighbors. I had no idea she was deliberately targeting you." Marcus invited Eleanor in for coffee, and during their conversation, he gained valuable insight into Patricia's behavior. Apparently, Patricia had been vocally opposed to Marcus purchasing the home from the beginning, making comments at her gatherings about maintaining the character of the neighborhood and property values. Most of us were disgusted by what she was implying, Eleanor confided. But Patricia has a way of making life difficult for people who cross her. Last year, she had the Gonzalez family's beautiful front garden dug up, claiming it violated some obscure neighborhood rule about native plants. Marcus thanked Eleanor for her honesty and the pie. As she left, she paused at the door. You know, several of us have been thinking it's time for new leadership in the neighborhood association. The election is next month. For the next few days, there were no cars blocking Marcus's driveway. Patricia had retreated temporarily, but Marcus remained vigilant. He knew enough about people like her to recognize that she wouldn't give up easily. Her pride had been wounded, and she would be looking for revenge. It came in the form of a certified letter from the neighborhood association, citing Marcus for multiple violations of community guidelines. His garden beds allegedly exceeded the permitted dimensions by 2 inches. The shade of blue he'd painted his front door was not on the approved color palette. The bird feeder in his backyard was attracting nuisance wildlife. The letter stated that he had 72 hours to correct these violations or face fines of $100 per day per violation. It was signed by Patricia as the association president, with a personal note added at the bottom. Perhaps you should have familiarized yourself with our rules before moving in. Marcus had actually reviewed all guidelines thoroughly before making any changes to his property. He knew that the garden bed dimensions were within limits. His door color had been specifically approved by the architectural committee, though Patricia had been absent from that meeting, and bird feeders were explicitly permitted in the bylaws. Rather than responding directly to Patricia, Marcus took the letter to his neighbor Walter Chun, who served as the association's secretary and kept all official records. Walter was appalled when he saw the letter. This wasn't authorized by the board. We never discussed any violations regarding your property. Walter compared the measurements listed in the letter to the official guidelines, and these aren't even the correct specifications. She's citing rules that don't exist. Together, they drafted a formal response to the entire board, attaching documentation that disproved each alleged violation. Marcus was careful to maintain a respectful, professional tone, never mentioning Patricia by name or alleging malicious intent. He simply presented the facts and requested clarification. The response was swift. The board called an emergency meeting, excluding Patricia on the grounds of conflict of interest. They issued a formal apology to Marcus and opened an investigation into Patricia's conduct as president. It seemed that Marcus wasn't the first resident to receive falsified violation notices, merely the first to challenge them so effectively. Patricia's response was to escalate further. The next morning, Marcus awoke to find his front yard had been toilet papered during the night. His garden beds trampled, and a crude message scratched into his front door. Go back where you came from. The security camera had captured everything, Patricia herself, in the middle of the night, vandalizing his property. The footage was clear enough to identify her distinctive tennis shoes and the monogram jacket she often wore to association meetings. Marcus called Miguel, who dispatched officers immediately. They took statements, photographed the damage, and reviewed the security footage. By noon, Patricia had been brought to the station for questioning. Meanwhile, word spread through the neighborhood. Residents began stopping by Marcus's house, offering help to clean up the mess and repair the damage. The Gonzalez family brought their gardening tools to help restore the flower beds. Mr. Wilkins brought a can of paint to touch up the door. The Patels brought lunch for everyone. As they worked, more stories emerged about Patricia's reign of terror over the neighborhood. The arbitrary rules, the selective enforcement, the subtle threats, the not-so-subtle discrimination. What struck Marcus most was how relieved everyone seemed now that someone had finally stood up to her. By evening, his yard was restored, his door repainted, and a new sense of community had been established. Neighbors lingered on his porch, sharing stories and laughing together in a way that Patricia's rigid neighborhood gatherings had never allowed. For the first time since moving in, Marcus felt truly at home. Patricia was released that evening with charges pending for vandalism, trespassing, and destruction of property. When her Range Rover pulled into her driveway, The street fell silent as neighbors watched from porches and windows. Patricia kept her head down, hurrying inside without acknowledging anyone. The next morning, Marcus was surprised to find Patricia's husband, Thomas Winters, at his door. Thomas was a quiet man who traveled frequently for business and rarely attended neighborhood functions. He looked exhausted and deeply uncomfortable. "Mr. Johnson, I owe you an apology for my wife's behavior. I had no idea things had gone this far." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Patricia has struggled with certain changes in the neighborhood over the years. It's no excuse, I know." Marcus invited him in, and over coffee, Thomas revealed that Patricia was seeking therapy as part of a plea deal to reduce the charges against her. The neighborhood association had already called for her resignation. "We'll be moving once this is all settled," Thomas said. "Patricia's sister has a place in Arizona. I think a fresh start would be good for us." Marcus nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction that justice had been served, but also a touch of sympathy for this clearly troubled woman. "I hope she gets the help she needs." After Thomas left, Marcus sat on his porch, watching his neighbors wave to him on their morning walks. Eleanor stopped by to tell him that several residents wanted him to run for association president in the upcoming election. The Gonzalez children asked if he would help coach their community baseball team, having heard about his college baseball days from their parents. In the distance, he saw Patricia watching from her window, a solitary figure behind glass. Their eyes met briefly before she let the curtain fall. There was no triumph in Marcus's heart, only the quiet certainty that he had stood his ground with dignity, the way he had throughout his career. 2 weeks later, moving trucks arrived at the Winters home. Patricia left without saying goodbye to anyone, but Thomas stopped by Marcus's house one last time. "She left this for you," he said, handing over an envelope before following the movers to their waiting car. Inside was a brief, handwritten note. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. No signature, but it didn't need one." Marcus folded the note carefully and put it away. Then he stepped out onto his front porch where his neighbors, his friends, were gathering for the community cookout they had planned. Someone had brought his famous ribs, another had set up a volleyball net in the communal park area, and the Gonzalez children were running through sprinklers on the lawn. As the new president of the Oakwood Heights Neighborhood Association, Marcus had already begun implementing changes. The arbitrary rules were being revised with input from all residents. The community fund, which Patricia had controlled with an iron grip, was now being used to improve the playground and establish a community garden. In the end, Patricia's attempts to drive him away had accomplished the opposite. They had brought the neighborhood together, breaking down the walls of formality and fear that she had built over the years. Marcus had found not just a house on Maple Street, but a home, a community, and a new purpose for his retirement years. The lesson hadn't been lost on anyone. True respect couldn't be demanded through intimidation or status. It had to be earned through character and actions. Marcus had spent his career upholding that principle, and now, in his retirement, he continued to live by it. As the sun set over Oakwood Heights, casting long shadows across freshly mowed lawns and newly planted gardens, Marcus raised his glass in a toast to his neighbors. "To community," he said simply, and everyone echoed the sentiment. Where Patricia had once rolled through division and fear, Marcus now led through unity and mutual respect, and the whole neighborhood was better for it. But the story didn't end with Patricia's departure. 6 months later, as Marcus was helping organize the neighborhood's first multicultural food festival, he received an unexpected letter. It was postmarked from Arizona, and he recognized the handwriting immediately. The letter was longer this time, more detailed. Patricia wrote about her therapy, her journey to confront the prejudices she'd been raised with but had never acknowledged. She didn't ask for forgiveness or friendship, merely wanted him to know that she was working to become a better person. "What you did," she wrote, "standing your ground with dignity rather than lowering yourself to true vengeance, showed me a better way to be. I'll never forget that lesson." Marcus shared the letter with a few of the neighbors who had suffered most under Patricia's reign. Their reactions ranged from skepticism to cautious approval, but all agreed that the neighborhood was healing, growing stronger without her toxic influence. The following spring, when the cherry trees on Maple Street burst into bloom and children played freely in front yards without fear of arbitrary rules being enforced, Marcus often thought about how conflict, handled with integrity, could lead to positive change. His career had taught him that justice wasn't about punishment, but about restoration, restoring balance, dignity, and community. That was the true victory, not seeing Patricia humbled, but seeing Oakwood Heights transformed. The diverse neighborhood was now truly living up to its potential, with residents from all backgrounds contributing to its vibrant community life. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when Marcus sat on his porch watching the neighborhood children play together on lawns where "Keep Off the Grass" signs had once stood, he would remember that final confrontation, not with satisfaction at having won, but with the solemn recognition that standing firm against injustice was always worth the struggle. He had made Maple Street his home, not by force but by character, earning his place through the same integrity that had guided his years wearing the badge. And in retirement, he had found a different kind of service, a different way to protect and strengthen his community. The driveway remained clear. The neighborhood association meetings were now filled with laughter and productive discussion. And Oakwood Heights had become what it always should have been, a place where everyone belonged. That, Marcus reflected as he waved to the Patels walking their dog past his immaculate garden, was justice in its purest form.